when my senior manager, Mr. Harrison, declared, "You should be thankful we brought you on board." I offered a polite smile, but in that precise instant, a silent resolution formed within me, dictating the conclusion of this chapter. My name is Diane Miller, a driven woman in my early 30s, armed with a dual master's in digital strategy and product development from the University of Texas. After almost a decade navigating the demanding landscape of various tech startups, I finally secured a coveted position at a leading innovation lab in Austin, Catalyst Innovations. The very name resonated with prestige, promising a fresh start, a true breakthrough, or so I initially believed. Catalyst Innovations proudly showcased its diverse workforce, plastering smiling faces of various backgrounds across its recruitment materials. Yet, within the sleek, glass-paneled offices, I found myself one of only a handful of women of color in a department of over 50. From day one, an unspoken expectation hung in the air. I had to constantly justify my presence. During my orientation, the HR director droned on about the company's commitment to inclusivity. My direct manager, however, conveyed a different message. Robert, a man in his late 40s, always impeccably dressed, with a penchant for tech jargon and a perpetual knowing smirk, never bothered to learn my full name. "Just Diane," he'd casually dismiss. "Easier for everyone." In my second week, I presented a groundbreaking AI integration proposal during a team brainstorm. Robert merely glanced at me, then swept his gaze across the room. "Let's keep our ideas grounded in reality," he interjected, discarding my input without a second thought. I remained silent, telling myself to establish my worth first, then assert myself later. But this incident became a recurring theme. My innovative concepts were routinely overlooked. I was excluded from crucial decision-making meetings. When I attempted to follow up on ongoing projects, I was informed that choices had already been finalized. Ironically, my deep dive analyses, my strategic blueprints, my creative insights were consistently incorporated into executive presentations, yet my name was conspicuously absent. I was deemed valuable enough to be exploited, but never to be acknowledged. The pivotal moment arrived during a high-stakes client dinner. Robert was the epitome of charm, the perfect host. As we exited the restaurant, he turned to me, a faint chuckle escaping his lips. "You really should be grateful we hired you, Diane. A resume like yours usually gets lost in the shuffle." I didn't flinch. I didn't shed a tear. I simply smiled. That night, I lay awake for hours, the phrase echoing in my mind like a broken record. You should be grateful. Something fundamental shifted within me. Gratitude for being disrespected? For being rendered invisible? No. I wouldn't resign. I wouldn't engage in a futile argument. I would meticulously prepare, and when the opportune moment arrived, they would never see it coming. After that night, a quiet transformation occurred within me, evolving from simmering frustration to meticulous strategizing. I didn't arrive at work the next morning seeking retribution. I arrived seeking irrefutable evidence. Approximately 3 weeks later, our team was assigned to develop a new digital transformation roadmap for a prominent e-commerce giant. This was the kind of a client that could define or derail careers. Robert made it unequivocally clear. This was an all-hands-on-deck situation. Yet, inexplicably, I was once again excluded from the core strategy sessions. Instead of raising a fuss, I chose to operate discreetly. I stayed late, immersed myself in the client's historical data, meticulously analyzed industry trends, and crafted a pitch deck that was audacious, innovative, and profoundly data-driven. I titled it, Seamless Futures, Redefining Digital Commerce. I submitted the deck to Robert privately, attaching all supporting documentation and research. His curt reply, "Thanks, I'll review it." I didn't anticipate applause. I merely desired a legitimate place at the table. A week later, the highly anticipated team-wide presentation commenced. Robert strode into the room, flanked by his favorite associate, Kevin, a confident Ivy League graduate whom everyone knew was being groomed for leadership, despite his consistent lack of original contributions. Then, Robert introduced Kevin's groundbreaking campaign idea, Digital Horizon. As Kevin clicked through the slides, my heart sank. It was my concept, my structural framework, my precise data points. Even the campaign's core tagline was a slightly diluted version of my own. But my name? Not once was it mentioned. They had not only plagiarized my work, they had systematically erased my very existence from it. I endured the meeting in a state of quiet numbness, my hands clenched beneath the table. A few colleagues glanced at me, their expressions knowing. One of them, Sarah, a senior analyst I had befriended, leaned over and whispered, "That's your deck, isn't it?" I nodded once, my gaze fixed forward. I didn't react. Not yet. Later that day, I accessed the server and downloaded every iteration of the campaign files I had meticulously crafted. I timestamped my emails. I backed up folders to a personal cloud drive. Every digital asset, every handwritten note, every version history. I even captured photographs of whiteboard sessions where I had sketched the initial framework during brainstorming weeks earlier. But the ultimate sting came during the project credits document. I inquired of Robert if my name would be included. He smirked. "We typically only list core contributors, but don't worry, being part of the team means you share in the success." I forced a smile. "Right, thanks for the clarification." In that moment, a crucial realization dawned upon me. Robert didn't perceive me as a threat. He viewed me as a silent, diligent worker bee, useful, expendable, forgettable. And that, unequivocally, was his first grave error. Because while he was preoccupied with silencing my voice, I was quietly sharpening my strategic blade. Following the Digital Horizon presentation, everything accelerated at a dizzying pace. The client was ecstatic. Contracts were signed. Bonuses were subtly hinted at. And Kevin? He was lauded as the second coming of Steve Jobs. Everyone in the department began to gravitate around him, laughing at his mediocre jokes, echoing his half-baked opinions, hailing him as a rising star. As for me, I was systematically sidelined. Robert summoned me to his office the day after the official client approval. "We're moving rapidly now," he stated, tapping his pen against a stack of mock-ups. "Kevin will spearhead the rollout. I'm reassigning you to the internal data cleanup. Not glamorous, I know, but someone has to handle the grunt work." I stared at him. "So, I'm being pulled off the campaign I originated?" He looked up, a smirk playing on his lips. "You were part of the brainstorm, certainly, but Kevin refined it for the client. It's about polish, Diane. You're talented, but still a bit unrefined." Unrefined? That word resonated deeper than I had anticipated, as if I were incomplete, merely decorative, fortunate to even be present. I left his office without uttering another word, but internally, something fractured. A few days later, Robert disseminated a department-wide email announcing the new project team. Kevin, of course, was designated as the strategic lead. Beneath him, 5 other names, including the intern who once asked me how to spell algorithm. My name was conspicuously absent. I stared at the screen for a prolonged period, then quietly forwarded the email to my personal account, adding it to the folder I had meticulously labeled receipts. I endeavored to keep my head down, to focus on my work, but the internal data cleanup assignment was a professional graveyard. Antiquated systems, forgotten reports, mountains of digital clutter no one else wanted to confront. It wasn't merely a reassignment. It was a slow, deliberate professional demise. Then came the HR meeting. A woman named Christine, who always wore a smile that suggested she was perpetually vying for Employee of the Month, invited me for a wellness chat. Inside the glass-walled room, she offered me herbal tea and presented a form titled Employee Performance Alignment. "There's been some concern," she began gently. "Your recent demeanor has been perceived as distant, difficult. We want to help." "Help me?" I inquired, my eyebrows raised. She nodded. We're recommending a few coaching sessions just to better integrate you into team culture. You're very talented, Diane, but sometimes your tone is misinterpreted. Misinterpreted. Another polite euphemism for too assertive, too quiet, too much, not enough, whatever they needed it to signify. I asked, was there a formal complaint? We can't disclose names, she replied with a practiced smile. But it's always best to proactively address feedback. I signed nothing. I simply thanked her and departed. That afternoon, my desk was relocated. Not even to another team, but to a solitary cubicle near the noisy server room. People ceased including me in email threads. I became a phantom with an ID badge. One day, in the kitchen, I overheard two interns whispering, "She's the one they're monitoring, right?" Yeah, Robert said she's unpredictable, could snap at any moment. That was the precise instant I realized this wasn't mere incompetence. This wasn't typical office politics. This was a slow, calculated erasure. And it was succeeding because I began to doubt myself, to question if I was imagining it all, if I truly wasn't polished enough, if I really should be grateful. But that spiral of self-doubt lasted only a single day. That night, I retrieved every piece of evidence I had painstakingly collected. Emails, slide versions, screenshots, calendar invitations, even chat logs where Kevin had requested random statistics that later appeared verbatim in the final pitch. I created a master folder, password protected, backed up on 3 separate drives. And then I remembered Maria. 3 years prior, I had freelanced for the e-commerce brand, now partnering with Catalyst Innovations. Maria had been the head of digital marketing on a smaller project I supported. We had instantly connected, discussing immigrant parents, imposter syndrome, the relentless hustle culture. She once advised me, "Don't let them diminish you." I located her LinkedIn profile, still listed at the company, still connected. I didn't message her yet, not directly. I needed more. I needed irrefutable certainty. That's when fate presented me with an unexpected gift. One evening, I stayed late. My isolated desk was situated near a shared conference room. I heard laughter, turned my head, and saw Kevin inside, rehearsing his pitch. He stumbled over the data slides. "I just ripped this from that Asian girl's deck," he casually informed a designer. "No clue what it means. Hope the client doesn't ask." The designer chuckled. "Just talk fast and smile." I discreetly pulled out my phone. No visuals, just audio. 15 seconds. Enough. Enough to prove he knew precisely what he was doing. Enough to demonstrate this wasn't an accidental oversight. Enough to completely reverse the narrative. They believed they were silencing me, but I was meticulously documenting everything. And soon, they would be the ones forced to explain themselves. I didn't sleep that night. I continuously replayed the audio in my head. Kevin laughing, mocking, boasting. I couldn't discern what burned more. The blatant theft or the casual, dehumanizing manner in which he spoke of it, as if I were merely some Asian girl whose work he could plunder. The following morning, I arrived early, not to work, but to execute my plan. I printed a meticulously detailed timeline of events. When I had created the original deck, when I had sent it to Robert, when Digital Horizon had mysteriously materialized. I highlighted timestamps, email threads, Slack conversations. I included a precise transcription of Kevin's incriminating performance. Then, I walked directly to the Ethics and Compliance office. No appointment, no warning. The woman at the front desk blinked when I slid the thick folder across the counter. "This is comprehensive," she noted. "It's just a copy," I stated calmly. "The original is securely stored elsewhere." She looked up at me. "Do you wish to submit this anonymously?" "No," I asserted firmly. I want it tied to my name, and I want you to understand something crucial. This isn't solely about me. If they're willing to do this to one employee, they'll inflict worse if no one intervenes. She nodded slowly and promised to escalate the matter. By noon, I received a calendar invitation for a clarification meeting with HR and a senior compliance officer. It was scheduled for the following morning. I knew precisely what that signified. They were sufficiently alarmed to react, yet confident enough to believe they could contain the situation. That night, I undertook two crucial actions. First, I dispatched a concise email to Maria, my former contact at the client company. Nothing dramatic, merely a friendly check-in, inquiring if she was still with the brand and expressing a desire to reconnect over coffee soon. Second, I meticulously rehearsed my meeting responses, as if preparing for a high-stakes trial. But the next day, it was a performance of its own kind. Christine from HR sat opposite me, her face carefully devoid of emotion. The compliance officer, Mr. Davies, wore glasses too small for his face and steadfastly avoided eye contact. They allowed me to speak. They posed a few vague questions, then they delivered their verdict. "There's no clear evidence of malicious intent," Mr. Davies stated. "While the similarities are unfortunate, collaborative work often results in overlapping contributions." I stared at him. "So, an entire campaign title, structure, and data points are lifted, repackaged, and I'm excluded from credit, and that's merely a coincidence?" He folded his hands. "We're not asserting you're incorrect, merely that it's inconclusive at this juncture." They were attempting to outlast me, to wear me down, to quietly bury the problem. I offered a faint smile. "Understood. Just so we're clear, I'm maintaining a record of this meeting for my own protection." Christine looked up. "Diane, we're all on the same team here." I rose. "Then act like it." I walked out calmly, devoid of anger or supplication. That afternoon, Robert strode past my desk, a smug expression on his face. "Tough week, huh?" he remarked, as if offering pity. I met his gaze. "You have no idea." He chuckled and continued on his way. He believed it was over. He believed I had failed. But all I had accomplished was to test the extent to which the system was willing to protect him. And now, I possessed my answer. It was time to ascend higher. Robert believed I emerged from that compliance meeting defeated. He thought the half-hearted internal review was sufficient to intimidate me into silence. But what he failed to comprehend was that his smug dismissal provided me with precisely what I required: confirmation that the company would safeguard him, not the truth. So, I ceased attempting to play by their rules. The very same afternoon I left that meeting, I received a response from Maria, my former contact at the e-commerce brand. "Of course, I remember you. Let's definitely catch up. I've actually been meaning to ask if you're involved in the new Digital Horizon campaign. The team at Catalyst speaks highly of Kevin. It sounded like your kind of work, though." That sentence ignited a fire within me. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I dedicated the weekend to meticulously crafting the most comprehensive summary of what had truly transpired. The original campaign deck I had submitted, the plagiarized data, the version histories, the incriminating audio clip, and even quotes from colleagues who had privately confessed they had witnessed me working on it first. I wasn't merely documenting events. I was constructing an irrefutable case. On Monday morning, I sent Maria a secure file with a brief, direct note. "I wanted to answer your question honestly. I was the original creator of the campaign, but as you'll see, that credit was unjustly taken from me. I'm not seeking sympathy. I simply believed you deserved the truth." I didn't expect an immediate response. She was a senior executive, undoubtedly busy, and likely navigating her own corporate intricacies. But less than 3 hours later, she called me directly. Her voice was taut, controlled. "Diane, I don't even know what to say. This is absolutely unacceptable. We greenlit this campaign under the explicit assumption that Kevin was the lead strategist." I said little, simply, "Now you know." She paused, then inquired, "Can I share this with our legal department?" I smiled. That's precisely why I sent it. 2 days later, chaos engulfed Catalyst Innovations like a sudden storm. The e-commerce brand's legal department issued a formal notice to Catalyst's executive board. They were suspending the campaign pending an internal review and launching their own independent investigation into the creative attribution of Digital Horizon. They also formally requested a meeting with the original creator, me. Word spread through the office like wildfire. Kevin appeared like a man walking into a job interview for which he was entirely unprepared. His usual swagger had vanished. At lunch, he attempted to approach me. "Hey, Diane, can we talk?" I didn't even look up. "We're past that." Later that afternoon, Robert summoned me into a conference room. This time, his smugness was gone. His voice was low, clipped. "What exactly did you send the client?" "The truth," I replied. "You've put us in a very difficult position." "No, Robert," I countered. "You put yourself in this position. I merely ceased allowing you to control the narrative." He attempted to shift gears. "We value your contributions. Perhaps we could revisit your involvement, retroactively credit your work?" I laughed. "You mean now that you've been exposed?" He offered no response. The next day, Catalyst held a mandatory town hall meeting. The COO stood before the company, tight-lipped, announcing that the Digital Horizon campaign had been terminated and that certain team members were under investigation for ethical misconduct and intellectual property misappropriation. Robert was conspicuously absent. Kevin was quietly escorted out by security before noon. I later learned that both had been placed on indefinite leave. By Friday, their names had been expunged from the company directory. No explanations, no goodbyes. But the most satisfying part? The brand reached out to me, not merely to express gratitude, but to offer me a lead consulting role to spearhead their future digital campaigns. They stated they valued creators who championed the truth, even when it was uncomfortable. That weekend, as I sat at my favorite coffee shop, reviewing the generous contract they had sent, I received an email from Catalyst Innovations' executive board. They wished to re-engage in dialogue regarding my future with the company. I didn't reply. Why would I? They didn't just lose a client. They lost something far more invaluable: my silence. And for the first time in months, I breathed freely, not because they were gone, but because I finally ceased diminishing myself to conform to their distorted version of me. In the days following the town hall, a palpable silence descended upon the Catalyst Innovations offices like a heavy fog. The laughter, the casual hallway banter, the clinking of coffee mugs, all gone. No one dared to speak too loudly or to the wrong person. Robert's office door remained shut. The frosted glass that once proudly displayed his name and title, now starkly bare. The silence surrounding his absence spoke volumes. Officially, he was on leave pending investigation. Unofficially, everyone knew he was finished. I overheard whispers in the elevator. One account manager claimed he had been blacklisted from 3 major agencies within 48 hours. Another mentioned he attempted to speak at a private networking event, only to be disinvited at the last minute. His name had become radioactive. Kevin? He didn't even attempt to resist. One morning, he appeared, was quietly escorted out with a cardboard box, and by the afternoon, His LinkedIn profile had vanished, simply erased, as if he had never existed. Internally, damage control went into overdrive. Leadership disseminated emails filled with hollow promises about rebuilding trust and genuinely listening to employee voices. But it was too late. The culture they had meticulously cultivated, where credit was stolen and silence was rewarded, was exposed for what it truly was. Clients began to withdraw, not just the e-commerce brand, but others who had been observing from the sidelines. Some cited a misalignment in values. Others didn't even bother to provide reasons. A quiet panic spread through upper management. And me? I became a cautionary tale, but with a profound twist. I wasn't fired. I wasn't reprimanded. I wasn't even contacted for a formal exit interview. Instead, I received a brief email from the board, thanking me for bringing clarity to an unfortunate situation and offering me the chance to redefine my role at the firm. I didn't respond because I already possessed another offer, a significantly better one. The e-commerce brand had brought me on as a lead strategy consultant with a legitimate seat at the table. My name prominently displayed on every deck, every press release, every credit. They didn't merely desire my ideas. They desired my authentic voice. My inaugural campaign launch under their banner created significant ripples across the industry. Seamless Futures, the original title they had attempted to dilute, was back in its purest form. It was honest, inclusive, and impactful, precisely as I had intended. And the industry took notice. A prominent marketing journal published a feature about it, the headline proclaiming, "From the sidelines to center stage, how one woman reclaimed her work and redefined the rules." When asked for comment, I simply stated, "Sometimes silence isn't weakness. It's strategy." I wasn't interested in revenge for its own sake. I didn't need to witness Robert beg or see Kevin humiliated. That wasn't the ultimate objective. The point was simple. They tried to erase me, and now their names were the ones conspicuously absent. 3 months later, I received an invitation to speak at a private leadership summit hosted by the very same brand that had hired me as a consultant. It was a gathering of CEOs, brand directors, agency heads, all the true power players in the industry. I almost declined. I didn't want to be perpetually known as the woman who exposed corruption. I desired recognition for my work, not solely for my battles. But then, I observed the summit's overarching theme: authenticity, ownership, and the future of creative leadership. And I realized I had something profoundly important to convey. When the day arrived, I stood backstage in a tailored black suit, clutching my notes. A part of me anticipated the familiar surge of nerves, the imposter syndrome, the self-doubt, the instinct to shrink. But they didn't materialize, because for the first time in years, I wasn't entering a room hoping to be seen. I already understood my inherent value. When I ascended the stage, the room fell silent. Phones were lowered, eyes were fixed upon me. I began with a single resonant sentence. This is not merely a story about a stolen idea. This is a story about what transpires when you attempt to silence the wrong person. I didn't name names. I didn't have to. I spoke about invisible labor, about being deliberately overlooked, about being told to be grateful simply for existing in the room. I spoke about the profound cost of silence and the transformative power of knowing precisely when to break it. Halfway through my address, I scanned the audience and saw someone I hadn't expected: Catalyst Innovation's newly appointed interim CEO. Apparently, they had registered at the last minute after learning I would be speaking. Our eyes met for a fleeting moment. Their expression was visibly uncomfortable. Good. At the conclusion of my talk, I shared one final narrative, one I had never publicly disclosed. In the weeks following the scandal, Catalyst's board had attempted to quietly settle with me, not merely with a financial offer, but with a revised contract. They offered me a promotion, full credit for the Digital Horizon campaign, and a carefully crafted narrative they hoped I would approve. One where the misunderstanding was mutual, where everyone could move on with dignity. I declined, because the truth doesn't require rewriting. It demands to be remembered. And then came the twist I had reserved for the very end. I informed the summit audience that I had initiated a mentorship program for young creatives, specifically women of color entering the marketing and tech world. Not for exposure, not for public relations, but because no one should ever have to endure the arduous lesson that silence is never safety. It is merely a delay. I concluded with this powerful statement. When someone tells you to be grateful for being in the room, remind them you didn't come to decorate the table. You came to build your own. The room erupted in thunderous applause. That moment wasn't revenge. It wasn't even solely victory. It was profound clarity. Robert and Kevin believed they were the gatekeepers. What they failed to realize was that the gate was already wide open. They simply weren't invited anymore. And me? I didn't just reclaim my voice, I amplified it exponentially.